Eternal Flame esteemed listeners, prepare to be captivated by Eternal Flame, a New York City tale of love's enduring power. Imagine a high school heartthrob secretly devoted to a gifted artist. He finally confesses his feelings, a moment of fragile hope, then silence. Years vanish. He's a success, yet haunted. She's reappeared, but changed, burdened. What shattered their first chance? What secrets now bind them? Their reunion ignites a burning question. Can a love forged in youth survive a decade of hardship, different worlds, and a past that refuses to stay buried? This is a story of second chances, hidden strength, and a flame that defies the odds. Before we dive in, please hit that subscribe button to join our community. Tune in and discover if their love can truly conquer all. Distinguished listeners, prepare to be captivated by The Eternal Flame, a New York City tale of love's enduring power. Imagine a high school heartthrob secretly devoted to a gifted artist. He finally confesses his feelings, a moment of fragile hope, then silence. Years vanish. He's a success, yet haunted. She's reappeared, but changed, burdened. What shattered their first chance? What secrets now bind them? Their reunion ignites a burning question. Can a love forged in youth survive a decade of hardship, different worlds, and a past that refuses to stay buried? This is a story of second chances, hidden strength, and a flame that defies the odds. Tune in and discover if their love can truly conquer all. Before we begin, please hit that subscribe button. Brooklyn in the fall of 2015 was a symphony of contrasts, a living, breathing artwork where the serene and the chaotic danced inseparably. The September sun cast a golden hue, painting the brownstones in warm light, while the relentless energy of the city pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the surface. Flatbush Avenue, a major artery, throbbed with the lifeblood of Brooklyn. Yellow taxis, those iconic symbols of New York hustle, weaved aggressively through the labyrinth of traffic, their horns creating a discordant yet somehow harmonious symphony. Street vendors, their voices hoarse yet vibrant, passionately hawked their wares, the tantalizing aroma of sizzling tamales and jerk chicken filling the air, a testament to the borough's diverse soul. Amidst this bustling tableau, Ethan Thorne navigated his final year at Brooklyn Heights High. He was, by all accounts, a golden boy, captain of the debate team, straight A's, and a charismatic smile that could disarm most teachers and charm even the most cynical classmates. Yet beneath the polished exterior, a quiet intensity simmered. His intelligence was a double-edged sword, allowing him to dissect complex philosophical arguments with ease, but also rendering him acutely aware of the subtle nuances of human emotion, especially his own. He walked the crowded hallways, a solitary island in a sea of youthful exuberance, his gaze often drifting, not to the trophies lining the display cases, but to the art studio on the third floor. It was there, amidst the scent of turpentine and forgotten dreams, that Sophia Petrova existed. Sophia was not merely an artist. She was a conduit for a world most people never saw. Her hands, often stained with paint or charcoal, moved with an almost mystical grace, transforming blank canvases into windows to her soul. She was a paradox, a vibrant splash of color in a world often rendered in muted tones, yet shrouded in an almost imperceptible veil of solitude. Her long, dark hair, the color of midnight ink, often fell across her face as she worked, hiding eyes that held the depth of ancient forests, eyes that could shimmer with fierce joy one moment and cloud with an inexplicable melancholy the next. While other girls clustered in giggling groups, Sophia often sat alone during lunch, sketching in a worn notebook, her focus absolute, as if the world outside her sketchbook simply ceased to exist. It was this intense, almost ethereal quality that had first captivated Ethan. He remembered the first time he truly saw her, not just as another student, but as the muse that unknowingly stirred something profound within him. It was during an impromptu art exhibition in the school's main hall. Her piece, A striking oil painting titled Whispers of the Unseen depicted a lone figure standing on a precipice, its form dissolving into a stormy, iridescent sky. It wasn't just a painting, it was a raw, aching echo of an unspoken loneliness. Ethan felt a kinship with that figure, a mirror to the quiet yearning he often felt in his own seemingly perfect life. He'd stood there for a long time, the murmurs of other students fading into a distant hum, utterly transfixed. He wanted to understand the pain, the beauty, the truth woven into each brushstroke. He wanted to understand Sophia. His admiration had festered, growing from a spark into an almost suffocating fire. He watched her from afar, observing the way, her brow furrowed in concentration, the fleeting smile she offered to a stray cat outside the art room window, the quiet intensity with which she guarded her space. He learned her habits, the hurried walk to the library before school, the lingering presence in the art studio until the very last bell, the single strong coffee she carried every Tuesday morning. He knew with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified him, that he was irrevocably drawn to her. One crisp October afternoon, the air biting with the first true kiss of autumn, Ethan found himself standing outside the art studio, a hastily scrawled note clutched in his sweaty palm. It was a raw, unedited confession, a desperate plea for her to see him, to understand the depth of his unspoken feelings. The words felt inadequate, clumsy even, compared to the kaleidoscope of emotions swirling within him. He was no artist, yet he wished he could paint his devotion with the same vividness she used to capture fleeting emotions. He waited, heart thrumming against his ribs like a trapped bird. The studio door, usually ajar, was closed. He could hear the faint, melancholic strains of a cello piece drifting from within, Sophia's preferred soundtrack for creation. He raised his hand, knuckles hovering inches from the chipped paint, when a sudden jarring crash echoed from inside, followed by a choked gasp. Ethan froze, every instinct screaming. The music abruptly ceased. A wave of ice-cold dread washed over him, a premonition of something deeply wrong. He didn't knock. He pushed the door open, the wood groaning in protest. The scene that greeted him was a tableau of chaos and despair. Canvases lay overturned, paint tubes squashed underfoot, and a delicate clay sculpture, clearly in progress, lay shattered on the floor like a broken dream. And in the center of it all, Sophia stood, her back to him, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She wasn't painting, she wasn't sketching, she was tearing apart her own work, ripping a half-finished portrait, her hands trembling with a violent, uncontrollable energy. The portrait, he noticed with a jolt, was of an older woman, her face etched with a familiar sorrow. "Sophia?" Ethan's voice was a whisper, barely audible above the ragged sound of her breathing. He took a hesitant step inside, the overwhelming smell of fresh paint mixing with something heavier, the acrid scent of despair. She whirled around, her eyes wide and haunted, not with surprise, but with a raw, almost feral desperation. There were streaks of paint on her cheeks, mingling with fresh tears. Her usually vibrant gaze was now clouded with a pain so profound it stole his breath. It wasn't the beautiful, composed artist he admired. It was a fragile, broken bird, caught in a storm. "Go away, Ethan," she choked out, her voice raw, laced with an unfamiliar bitterness. She clutched a shard of the broken clay sculpture, a sharp edge pressing against her palm, drawing a tiny bead of blood. Just leave. But he couldn't. Not when her eyes, usually mirrors of quiet introspection, now screamed of a hidden terror. He saw fear, not just of him, but of something deeper, something clawing at her from within. He saw a profound vulnerability he had never imagined. His carefully rehearsed confession, the note in his hand, felt utterly meaningless in the face of her overwhelming anguish. "Sophia, what's wrong?" he asked, taking another step closer, his voice low and urgent. He saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a brief, desperate plea, quickly masked by a wall of resolve. She shook her head, tears streaming freely now. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You can't understand." Her gaze shifted past him, towards the open doorway, as if expecting someone. A shadow seemed to fall over her face, deepening the fear in her eyes. It was a look he would never forget. A look of someone trapped, utterly alone, facing an unseen threat. Then, with a sudden, almost violent movement, she turned and fled, not towards him, but past him, out the door and down the deserted hallway, leaving behind the wreckage of her studio, the lingering scent of sadness, and a bewildered Ethan, his heart a raw, exposed nerve. The note, now crumpled and forgotten, fell from his hand to the paint-splattered floor. The echoes of her choked voice, the haunted look in her eyes, and the chilling premonition of unseen dangers clung to him long after she disappeared. He stood, amidst the ruins of her artistic sanctuary, the shattered sculpture mirroring the abrupt fracture of his own idealized perception of her. He had expected a moment of connection, a hesitant step towards a shared future. Instead, he had stumbled upon a hidden wound, a terrifying vulnerability that hinted at a past far darker and more complex than he could have ever imagined. The golden boy of Brooklyn Heights High, who always had an answer, suddenly found himself adrift in a sea of unanswered questions, compelled by an irresistible force to understand the sorrow that had eclipsed Sophia's vibrant spirit. His admiration had just transformed into a desperate, aching need to save her, even though he had no idea what he was saving her from. And that, he realized, was the beginning of his true journey, a journey that would redefine everything he thought he knew about love, about strength, and about the fragile line between light and shadow. The silence of the abandoned studio screamed a terrifying truth. Sophia was in trouble, and her secret was far bigger than a broken heart. Size 2, width 100%, a line center. The dust of Sophia's departure in Chapter 1 settled like a pall over Ethan's final year of high school. The vibrant colors of his world seemed to drain, replaced by a muted palette of confusion and longing. Her abrupt flight from the art studio, the raw terror in her eyes, had etched itself onto the very fabric of his memory, a persistent, aching, phantom limb. He searched for her, subtly at first, then with increasing desperation. Whispers among classmates, inquiries at the school office, even venturing to the quiet, leafy street where she'd lived, only to find a for sale sign already hammered into the lawn. Sophia Petrova had vanished as utterly as a whisper in the wind, leaving behind only the shattered remnants of her art and the profound, unanswered question that gnawed at Ethan's soul. A decade later, the youthful Ethan Thorne was a ghost, replaced by a man forged in the crucible of ambition and guarded restraint. The boy who'd fumbled a love note was now a formidable presence in the competitive world of New York finance. His office, a sleek testament to minimalist success, perched high above Manhattan's concrete canyons, offered a panoramic view of the city that had once held the promise of young love. Glass walls reflected the ceaseless dance of clouds and skyscrapers, a stark contrast to the turbulent, unreflected depths of his own heart. He possessed an almost preternatural ability to read markets, to predict patterns invisible to others, yet the one pattern that remained stubbornly opaque was Sophia's disappearance. It was a wound that refused to heal, a scar tissue forming over an open ache, numb but ever present. He dated, of course. Women gravitated to his quiet confidence, his sharp intellect, and the enigmatic hint of a sorrow he rarely revealed. But each relationship felt like sketching on parchment with a dull pencil, devoid of the vibrant, visceral truth he had glimpsed in Sophia's art. They were pleasant, practical, but never truly alive. They couldn't stir the dormant currents within him, currents that only Sophia had ever touched. He carried her like a forgotten melody, humming just beneath the surface of his conscious thought, always threatening to break through. Brooklyn, however, was a mistress he could not abandon. He lived in Dumbo, just a stone's throw from his old high school, the iconic bridge a steel artery connecting him to a past he couldn't quite sever. He often walked its cobbled streets, his mind a quiet echo chamber, searching for a ghost he knew he might never find. He had built an empire, yes, but its foundations felt incomplete without the one person who truly understood the language of his unspoken self. One rain-swept Tuesday, the city weeping a cold, relentless drizzle, Ethan found himself at the opening of a new gallery in Bushwick. It was a rare indulgence, a concession to the art history minor he'd pursued in college, a fleeting attempt to connect with the world Sophia once inhabited. The gallery space was a former warehouse, its industrial starkness softened by carefully placed spotlights illuminating a collection of avant-garde sculptures. The air hummed with the murmur of critics, collectors, and the self-important chatter of the art scene. He drifted through the crowd, a glass of lukewarm champagne in hand, his mind miles away, probably dissecting stock trends. Then he saw her. She stood by a sculpture of intertwined metal roots, a silent sentinel amidst the swirling throng. Her hair, the same midnight ink as he remembered, was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun, highlighting the sharp, almost fragile angles of her face. She was clad in a simple, charcoal-gray dress that, despite its understated elegance, seemed to absorb all the light around her, making her a beacon of stark contrast against the vibrant pieces. Sophia. The name. A silent scream in his mind vibrated through his entire being. It was a physical jolt, a lightning strike that ripped through the carefully constructed calm of his decade. The champagne glass almost slipped from his trembling fingers. Time, that relentless tyrant, seemed to fracture, the cacophony of the gallery fading into a distant hum. Her profile was etched with a maturity he hadn't known, a new depth of experience that had replaced the youthful vulnerability. There was a subtle tension in her shoulders, a faint line of weariness around her eyes that hinted at battles fought and scars unseen. She was Sophia, yet she was irrevocably changed. A butterfly emerged from a chrysalis, carrying the marks of its transformation. He walked towards her, each step an eternity, the marble floor seeming to tilt beneath his feet. His breath hitched, in his throat, a forgotten language struggling to be spoken. He saw her eyes, those deep, ancient forest eyes, now holding a guardedness that was both defensive and oddly alluring. They flickered over the crowd, alert, almost wary, before settling on the sculpture, as if finding solace in its cold, unyielding form. Sophia? His voice was a raw whisper, barely audible above the din, yet it sliced through the air like a blade. She flinched, a subtle tremor running through her frame. Her head snapped towards him, those dark eyes widening in disbelief, then morphing into something he couldn't quite decipher, a flicker of recognition, followed by a profound, almost desperate attempt to conceal it. Her face, usually so expressive in his memories, became a mask, instantly devoid of emotion, a blank canvas refusing to yield its secrets. Ethan? Her voice was a low murmur, a broken chord, as if the name itself was a ghost from a past she had painstakingly buried. There was no warmth, no joy, only a chilling detachment, a deliberate wall erected between them. The contrast was brutal. He, a man who had carried her image like a sacred relic for 10 years, standing before a woman who seemed to view him as an unwelcome echo. His heart, which had just soared with recognition, plummeted into a chasm of cold realization. This wasn't the tentative artistic Sophia he had known. This was a woman hardened, her vulnerability replaced by a steeliness that both intrigued and terrified him. It's really you," he managed, his voice thick with unspent emotion. He wanted to reach out, to touch her arm, to confirm she was real, but something in her posture, a subtle shift in her weight, warned him against it. She seemed ready to bolt. She offered a small, curt nod, her gaze darting away from his as if the intensity of his presence was too much to bear. "Yes, it's me." Her eyes scanned the room almost frantically, as if she were searching for an escape route or perhaps for someone else. I never stopped thinking about you," he confessed, the words tumbling out before he could censor them, raw and earnest. "After you left, I tried to find you. A faint, almost imperceptible shadow crossed her face, a ripple of something akin to pain. "It was for the best," she said, her voice flat, devoid of the emotion that shimmered in his. "Some things are better left buried." Buried? Ethan felt a surge of indignation, a decade of unanswered questions rising to the surface. "Sophia, you disappeared. No word, no explanation. You left me in a wreckage, just like your studio that day." The reference was unintentional, a slip of the tongue, but it hit its mark. Her eyes, which had been avoiding his, now snapped back, blazing with an intensity that bordered on defiance. "You think I wanted to leave?" Her voice dropped, a dangerous whisper. "You think I chose to shatter everything?" The mask she'd worn for years seemed to crack, just for a fleeting second, revealing a sliver of the raw emotion he remembered. But then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by a chillingly cold resolve. "My life isn't what you remember, Ethan," she continued, her voice regaining its composure, but laced with an almost imperceptible undercurrent of warning. "It's complicated, dangerous." She looked past him again, her eyes narrowing as if she saw something in the distance, something only she could perceive. It was not a casual glance. It was the wary, assessing look of a hunted animal. Before he could press her, before he could demand answers that had haunted him for a decade, a harsh, clipped voice cut through the air behind them. "Sophia, there you are." Ethan turned, his gaze meeting a pair of cold, steel-gray eyes. The man, standing there, was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that seemed to hide a lean, almost predatory build. His face was sharp, angular, devoid of warmth, and there was an undeniable air of authority, almost ownership, about him. His presence was like a sudden drop in temperature, chilling the very air around them. Sophia's body stiffened, almost imperceptibly. Her hand, which had been resting loosely by her side, instinctively went to the delicate gold chain around her neck, her fingers closing over a small, unidentifiable charm hidden beneath her dress. "Mr. Volkov," she said, her voice flat, devoid of any genuine emotion, almost robotic. Mr. Volkov. The name resonated with a dark, unfamiliar power. Ethan felt an instinctive surge of possessiveness, a primal protectiveness he hadn't realized he still harbored for Sophia. The man's gaze swept over Ethan, dismissive, arrogant, lingering for a fraction of a second too long on the lingering tension between them. "We were just discussing business," Sophia interjected smoothly, her eyes meeting Ethan's for a fleeting moment, a silent plea for him to play along. The message was clear. Do not complicate this. Ethan, still reeling from the shock of seeing her and the chilling appearance of this stranger, could only nod, his mind racing. Business? What kind of business did Sophia Petrova, the artist, have with a man who exuded such an aura of danger? Indeed. Volkov's voice was like gravel, a low rumble that sent shivers down Ethan's spine. His eyes, devoid of any warmth, flicked back to Sophia. "We have much to discuss. Your presence is required elsewhere, immediately." It wasn't a request. It was a command. Sophia gave Ethan one last, lingering look, a look that held 1,000 unspoken words. Apology, warning, and a deep, aching sadness. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her charcoal dress flowing behind her like a shadow, disappearing into the throng, with Mr. Volkov trailing closely, his hand almost imperceptibly resting on the small of her back, a gesture that felt less like guidance and more like a possessive claim. Ethan stood there, utterly alone, the cacophony of the gallery returning with a deafening roar. The lukewarm champagne tasted like ash. Sophia had reappeared, but not as the free spirit. He remembered. She was a woman burdened, entangled in a dangerous web, bound by a mysterious stranger. The eternal flame of his admiration, which had flickered for a decade, now roared to life, fueled by a terrifying cocktail of concern, fear, and an undeniable, consuming need to unravel the secrets that now defined Sofia Petrova. Her silent plea, the haunting look in her eyes, and the chilling presence of Mr. Volkov screamed a new truth. This was no simple reunion, but the beginning of a perilous journey into a world where love might not be enough to conquer all. The game, he realized, had just begun, and the stakes were higher than he could possibly imagine. The aftermath of the gallery encounter left Ethan adrift in a sea of questions, each wave crashing against the fragile shore of his carefully constructed reality. Mr. Volkov. The name itself felt like a curse, a dark stain on the vibrant tapestry of Sofia's memory. The man's chilling presence, Sofia's palpable fear, and her cryptic warning about dangerous complications echoed in his mind, stripping away the comfortable veneer of his successful life. The high-stakes world of finance, once his ultimate challenge, now felt like a trivial playground compared to the unknown labyrinth Sofia seemed to inhabit. He spent the next few days in a haze, the hum of his trading desk replaced by the incessant thrum of Sofia's whispered warning. His perfectly organized calendar, usually a beacon of efficiency, now seemed utterly irrelevant. He canceled meetings, ignored calls from frantic junior analysts, and found himself staring blankly at his monitors, the flickering green and red lines mocking his inability to predict the trajectory of his own heart. He tried to research Volkov, but the name was too common, yielding a deluge of irrelevant search results. It was like trying to catch smoke. His sleek, minimalist apartment, usually a sanctuary, felt cold and empty. He paced its polished floors, the city lights outside his window blurring into an indifferent kaleidoscope. He thought of Sofia's art studio, the shattered clay, the raw tears. He had always believed in logic, in predictable outcomes, but Sofia was a rogue variable, an anomaly that defied every equation he knew. The thought of her being entangled with someone like Volkov, a man whose eyes held the coldness of a predator, gnawed at him relentlessly. It was a gnawing fear that mirrored the one he had seen in her own eyes years ago. Ethan knew he couldn't simply let her disappear again. This time, the stakes felt immeasurably higher. This wasn't about a childish crush. It was about a woman he had never stopped loving, a woman who was clearly in peril. He found himself walking the streets of Bushwick at odd hours, hoping for another glimpse, another chance encounter. The vibrant, bohemian neighborhood, once a canvas for Sofia's dreams, now felt like a hunting ground for unseen shadows. Days bled into a week, then two. The city's indifference was a stark contrast to Ethan's burning need for answers. He revisited the gallery, feigning interest in other exhibits, his eyes covertly scanning for any sign of her or of Volkov. Nothing. It was as if they had both dissolved back into the city's vast, unforgiving anonymity. One evening, exhausted and frustrated, Ethan found himself at a small, unassuming cafe near Sofia's old high school, a place he used to frequent. The aroma of stale coffee and old books filled the air, a nostalgic comfort. He sat in a worn armchair, scrolling aimlessly through news feeds when a familiar name, stark against the digital white, made his blood run cold. Art forgery ring busted, lesser-known Russian collector implicated. The headline itself was unremarkable, but the accompanying photo wasn't. It was a grainy, slightly blurred image of a man being escorted out of a building by plainclothes officers. His face was partially obscured, but the angular jawline, the cold glint in his eyes, it was unmistakably Volkov. And then the article mentioned a gallery, a new independent space that had recently opened in Bushwick, known for featuring emerging, often overlooked artists. A cold dread spread through Ethan's chest. This was it. The missing piece of the puzzle. Volkov wasn't just some shady business associate, he was a criminal. And Sofia was somehow caught in his web. The dangerous life she spoke of wasn't an exaggeration. It was a chilling reality. The very ground beneath him seemed to shift. He devoured the article, each word a hammer blow. The ring specialized in sophisticated forgeries of obscure Russian avant-garde artists, bypassing the heavily scrutinized works of masters. The twist? They often targeted artists with family ties to the old country, leveraging connections or, implicitly, vulnerabilities. The knot in Ethan's stomach tightened. Sophia's last name was Petrova. Her mother was Russian. The connection was undeniable, terrifying. He tried Sophia's old phone number, the one he still had memorized. It rang endlessly, then went to a generic voicemail. He tried every social media platform, searching for her name, for any alias. Nothing. She was a ghost in the digital realm. Driven by a desperate need for answers, Ethan turned to the one person he knew still had a tangential connection to Sophia's old life. Mrs. Anya Petrov, their former art teacher, a kindly, eccentric woman who had championed Sophia's talent fiercely. He found her, as expected, tending to a community garden in the East Village, her hands caked with rich earth, her silver hair a halo around her benevolent face. "Ethan, dear boy, look at you, all grown up," she exclaimed, her voice a warm embrace, but her smile faltered when she saw the grim set of his jaw. "What brings you to my humble patch of green, my financial wizard?" Ethan didn't waste words. "Mrs. Petrov, it's about Sophia Petrova. I saw her." He recounted the gallery encounter, the chilling presence of Volkov, and the fragmented information from the news article. He watched her face, reading every nuanced shift in her expression. Mrs. Petrov's eyes, usually sparkling with artistic fervor, dulled with a profound sadness. She sighed, a deep, weary sound that carried the weight of years. "Ah, Sophia, my brightest star, caught in the darkest of storms." She gestured towards a weathered bench. "Sit, Ethan. There's much you don't know." She began to speak, her voice low, a narrative unfurling like a fragile scroll. After Sophia disappeared, Mrs. Petrov had tried to keep in touch with Sophia's mother, Elena. Elena, a talented but struggling artist herself, had been increasingly burdened by debts, particularly medical bills for Sophia's younger sister, Lena, who suffered from a rare chronic illness. It was a silent, relentless drain on their meager resources. Elena, bless her heart, was too proud to ask for help, Mrs. Petrov recalled, her gaze distant, fixed on a wilting rose. And Sophia carried the weight of the world on her young shoulders. She adored Lena, you see. Her little sister was her sun, her moon, her entire universe. The story deepened, painted with strokes of quiet tragedy. Elena, desperate, had been approached by a collector, a seemingly benevolent patron who offered to exhibit her more obscure works. This man was, as Ethan now suspected, an associate of Volkov. He began subtly investing in Elena's art, lending money, slowly weaving a web of financial dependency. But then, Mrs. Petrov continued, her voice trembling, Elena got sick. Very sick. And the medical bills. They became insurmountable. That's when the collector showed his true colors. He demanded more. He threatened to expose Elena's debts to the authorities, to ruin her, to take Lena away. Ethan's blood ran cold. And Sophia stepped in. It wasn't a question. Mrs. Petrov nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. Yes, Sophia, barely out of high school, offered herself, her talent, her boundless creativity. She would paint, whatever they wanted, in exchange for her mother's freedom and Lena's care. The chilling truth settled over Ethan like a shroud. Sophia wasn't just burdened, she was indentured. She was a modern-day serf, her artistic soul enslaved to a criminal enterprise, her brushstrokes not for passion, but for survival. The older woman in the ripped portrait from her studio, it was likely her mother, Elena, her face etched with the sorrow of a mother forced to make an impossible choice. "They made her a ghost, Ethan," Mrs. Petrov finished, her voice a broken whisper. "They forced her to cut off contact, to become anonymous. They controlled her every move. She had to ensure Lena's safety. She had to ensure her mother wouldn't suffer." A furious tempest raged inside Ethan. His decade of silent yearning, his idealized image of Sophia, shattered into a million pieces, replaced by a visceral rage against the monsters who had stolen her light. He understood now. The fear, the detachment, the sudden flight. It was all a desperate act of self-preservation, a sacrifice for the people she loved. "Lena." "How is Lena now?" Ethan asked, his voice rough. Mrs. Petrov's eyes softened. "Lena is stable. The treatments are ongoing, expensive, but Sophia's work has kept them afloat. She visits them secretly sometimes, at a quiet clinic in Queens. Elena is weak, but proud of her daughter's sacrifice. A clinic in Queens." The detail was a single fragile thread, but it was enough. As the setting sun cast long, melancholic shadows across the garden, Ethan rose, his mind ablaze with a newfound clarity and purpose. The boy who'd loved her had been lost in a romantic haze. The man before Mrs. Petrov was a warrior, armed with knowledge and propelled by an unshakable resolve. He would find this clinic, he would find Lena, and he would find Sophia. "Thank you, Mrs. Petrov," he said, his voice imbued with a steel that belied its quiet tone. "You've given me more than answers. You've given me a reason." He left the garden, the scent of earth and fading roses clinging to his clothes. The city, once a mere backdrop, now felt like a battleground. He thought of Sophia's painting, whispers of the unseen, and the lone figure on the precipice. Sophia was that figure, teetering on the edge, her vibrant soul threatened by unseen forces. But she wasn't alone anymore. He was coming for her. And Volkov, and anyone else who dared to keep her chained, would learn the true meaning of an eternal flame, a force that once ignited would burn away every shadow until it reached its heart. The game, he realized, was no longer about finding Sophia. It was about freeing her, and he would stop at nothing. Size, too, with 100% aligned center. The revelation from Mrs. Petrov, a bitter draught of truth, ignited a firestorm within Ethan. Sophia wasn't lost, she was imprisoned. Her vibrant soul, once a beacon of artistic freedom, was now shackled by a debt of desperation and a ruthless criminal enterprise. The thought gnawed at him, a relentless beast consuming his peace. His financial empire, once a source of pride, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping him while Sophia suffered. He plunged headfirst into the murky depths of Volkov's world. His Wall Street connections, once used to manipulate markets, were now meticulously leveraged to unearth fragments of information about the forgery ring. He learned that Volkov, whose real name was Anatoly Volkov, was more than just a collector. He was a silent, insidious force in the underground art world, a spider weaving webs of debt and blackmail. He targeted vulnerable artists, particularly those with family in Eastern Europe, exploiting their ties and talents to create high-quality forgeries that infiltrated legitimate markets. Sophia was not unique. She was merely his most valuable asset, his most gifted slave. Ethan found the clinic in Queens. It was a humble, almost anonymous building tucked away on a quiet residential street, its exterior belying the fragile lives within. He spent days observing, a phantom presence, his gaze drawn to the quiet comings and goings. He saw Lena, Sophia's younger sister, a frail girl with surprisingly bright eyes, being wheeled in and out for treatments. He saw Elena, Sophia's mother, her face etched with a profound weariness, yet holding Lena's hand with unwavering devotion. He longed to approach them, to offer help, but the risk was too great. Volkov's reach, he knew, extended far beyond the art world. Any direct contact could jeopardize Lena's care, could expose Sophia's secret visits, could shatter the fragile peace they had forged through her sacrifice. His life became a meticulously choreographed dance between his public persona as a driven financier and his secret existence as Sophia's silent guardian. He tracked Volkov's movements, deciphered encrypted communications that hinted at upcoming deals, and pieced together the intricate network of his illicit operations. The adrenaline of the hunt was a constant companion, but it was overshadowed by a searing frustration. How could he free Sophia without endangering her family? How could he bring down a man who held the very breath of her loved ones in his cruel grip? Then, a flicker of hope amidst the encroaching shadows. Through a convoluted chain of contacts, Ethan learned that Volkov was preparing for a major sale, a highly anticipated auction of several newly discovered Russian avant-garde pieces. The whispers suggested these were Sophia's latest, most intricate forgeries, masterpieces of deception. This was it, the opportunity. If he could expose Volkov and his forgeries at such a high-profile event, it might crumble his empire, releasing Sophia from her gilded cage. The emotional toll was immense. He slept little, haunted by Sophia's desperate eyes, her forced detachment. He imagined her alone in a studio somewhere, her hands, once instruments of pure creation, now forced to mimic, to deceive. The contrast was a blade twisting in his gut. He was the man who had everything, she the woman who had sacrificed it all. Their worlds were parallel lines, drawn so close, yet kept agonizingly apart by circumstance, and a man whose soul was as dark as a void. One evening, unable to bear the silence of his apartment, Ethan found himself outside a familiar building in Bushwick, the art gallery where he had first seen Sophia again. It was closed, dark, but the memory of her standing by the metal sculpture, a sentinel of sorrow, was vivid. He noticed a small handwritten sign tucked discreetly in the corner of the window. Artist's Studio for Rent. Inquire within. A long shot, but a shot nonetheless. He called the number, his voice carefully neutral. The landlord, a gruff, elderly man named Mr. Henderson, informed him the studio was available, but needed extensive cleaning. Ethan, against all reason, took it. He didn't care about the rent. He cared about the possibility, however remote, that Sophia had once worked there. The scent of old paint, faint but distinct, clung to the walls like a memory. He began spending evenings there not to work, but to simply be. He'd sit in the silent, empty space, imagining Sophia, trying to conjure her presence. He even bought a few tubes of paint, some canvases, and began to dabble, clumsy strokes attempting to articulate the feelings that words couldn't capture. It was a crude, therapeutic act, a silent dialogue with the artist he sought to free. Then, one stormy night, the wind howling like a mournful spirit, a sudden sharp rap echoed on the studio door. Ethan froze, his heart leaping into his throat. He wasn't expecting anyone. He peered through the peephole, standing in the dimly lit hallway. Rain clinging to her dark hair was Sophia. Her face was pale, drawn, her eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and exhaustion. She held a small, worn canvas bag clutched to her chest. She looked like a drowned wraith, a fragile echo of the woman he loved. Ethan's breath caught. He threw open the door, a silent gasp escaping him. "Sophia!" She stumbled inside, shivering, her gaze darting around the studio, then settling on him with a look of stunned disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend his presence there. "Ethan? What are you doing here?" Her voice was a fragile whisper, a thread stretched taut. I leased the studio," he lied, or rather, omitted the full truth. "It was empty. I needed a space." He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the desperate tremor in her hands. "You're soaked. Come in, let me get you something warm." She hesitated, a battle waging in her eyes, the ingrained caution against the sheer exhaustion of her spirit. Exhaustion won. She stepped fully inside, the door creaking shut behind her, sealing them within the cocoon of the studio. "I didn't think anyone would be here," she murmured, her voice barely audible. I just needed to retrieve something I left behind." Her eyes scanned the familiar space, a ghost of a memory flickering across her face. He watched her, his heart aching. "What is it?" he asked gently, trying to keep his voice steady, masking the whirlwind of emotions inside him. She walked to a small, hidden alcove in the wall, half hidden behind a loose brick. She pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box, weathered with age. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside, Nestled on a bed of faded velvet lay a collection of old photographs and a single, small, unfinished clay sculpture. It was a miniature version of the one he had seen shattered on the floor years ago. A mother holding a child, faces obscured by love. "This is all that's left," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Of them. Of me." She held up a faded photograph. It was of Elena, her mother, younger, vibrant, holding baby Lena. Elena's eyes, even in the black and white, held the same fierce love that Sophia carried. My mother, Lena, their everything. The dam broke. The carefully constructed wall of her composure crumbled, and tears, hot and silent, streamed down her face. She didn't sob, but her body shook with the force of unspoken grief and fear. Ethan moved towards her, his instincts overriding all caution. He didn't speak. He simply pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she finally allowed herself to break. Her head rested against his chest, her tears soaking his shirt. He felt the trembling of her frame, the fragile vulnerability she had so fiercely guarded. "Sophia," he murmured, his voice husky with emotion, stroking her hair. I know, everything." He told her about Mrs. Petrov, about Lena, about Volkov, about the forgeries. He laid bare his understanding, not with judgment, but with unwavering empathy. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." She pulled back, her eyes wide with shock, then fear. "How do you know?" she whispered, her voice laced with terror. "Did Volkov—" "No," he interrupted firmly. "He doesn't know I know. Not yet. I've been watching him. I've been trying to find a way to help you, to bring him down." Her gaze searched his, raw and vulnerable, a silent plea for truth. You believe me? You believe I didn't choose this?" "I believe you, Sophia," he said, looking directly into her eyes, letting all the unspoken years of longing, of belief, pour into his gaze. "I always have. And I'm going to get you out of this. All of you." A flicker of hope, fragile as a butterfly's, wing danced in her eyes, quickly followed by a crushing wave of despair. "You can't, Ethan. You don't understand how deep this goes. He owns us. He owns Lena's future. He has eyes everywhere. If you try anything, he'll destroy everything. He'll destroy them." Her voice was a desperate, chilling warning. The weight of her words settled heavily between them, a cold, unyielding truth. Volkov was a shadow that had consumed her life, and now threatened to consume his. He knew this was not a simple battle, but a war, fought on treacherous ground. But looking into Sophia's pain-filled eyes, feeling the fragile warmth of her body against his, Ethan knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would fight. For her, for Lena, for Elena, and for the eternal flame of their love that had, against all odds, managed to survive. The storm had reached them, but he would not let it extinguish their light. The game had truly begun, and Ethan, the financial wizard, was about to become a reluctant warrior, fighting for a prize far more valuable than any fortune. He would bring Volkov's empire crashing down, even if it meant risking his own. Size the Tuntu, width 100%, align center. The storm that raged outside the Bushwick studio that night mirrored the tempest in Ethan's soul. Sophia's confession, delivered amidst her tears and the ghost of childhood memories, had been a double-edged sword, a crushing weight of truth and a liberating spark of understanding. He saw her not as a damsel in distress, but as a warrior, her sacrifices a testament to a love fiercer than any he had ever known. But her desperate warning, "He'll destroy everything. He'll destroy them," echoed like a death knell, a chilling counterpoint to his burgeoning hope. The following weeks were a crucible. Ethan, the financial wizard, transformed into a strategist of liberation. He dove deeper into Volkov's network, not just for information, but for leverage. He uncovered shell corporations, illicit dealings with art restoration houses, and a meticulously crafted web of money laundering. He worked with a relentless, almost obsessive focus, his apartment and the art studio becoming twin war rooms, littered with maps, legal documents, and cryptic notes. He knew he couldn't simply expose Volkov. He had to dismantle his entire operation without Lena and Elena becoming collateral damage. Sophia, meanwhile, remained a phantom. After that night, she slipped away. A note left on his makeshift easel. "Don't risk everything for me, Ethan. You don't understand the monster he is. I have to protect them." It was a plea, a warning, and a heart-wrenching reaffirmation of her sacrifice. But her words only solidified his resolve. He saw the strength in her fear, the profound love that fueled her quiet despair. He would not just save her. He would save the family she had fought so fiercely to protect. The night of Volkov's grand auction loomed, a black hole drawing them all in. The location was a lavish, undisclosed penthouse in Midtown, shrouded in secrecy, accessible only by private invitation. Ethan, leveraging an old money contact from his banking days, secured a discreet invitation, his heart a drum against his ribs. He carried no weapons, only a meticulously crafted digital dossier, a collection of undeniable evidence that would expose Volkov's entire forgery ring. This was his battlefield, and information was his sword. Sophia, he knew, would be there. Irene, the chief artisan of Volkov's deception, her presence was mandatory, a silent trophy for the criminal impresario. He pictured her, a jewel in a gilded cage, her spirit dimmed but not broken. The penthouse was a symphony of opulence and suppressed tension. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto marble floors, reflecting the hushed murmurs of collectors and critics. The air was thick with a scent of expensive perfume and the faint, metallic tang of anticipation. Ethan moved through the crowd, a shark in a school of guppies, his gaze scanning for Sophia, for Volkov. Then he saw her. She stood by, a pedestal displaying a stunning, vibrant Kazimir Malevich painting, her dark dress a stark contrast to the colorful masterpiece. She looked ethereal, breathtaking, yet her eyes, those deep, expressive eyes, held a subtle flicker of resignation, a profound sadness that pierced Ethan's very core. She was a living canvas of stolen dreams. Volkov emerged from the shadows, a corpulent spider overseeing his web. He moved with a chillingly casual arrogance, his eyes sweeping over the guests, a possessive glint in their depths as they briefly settled on Sophia. He seemed to whisper something to her, a gesture of ownership that made Ethan's blood boil. The auction began, the auctioneer's voice a smooth, predatory purr. The Malevich painting, Sophia's creation, was the pièce de résistance, the crown jewel of Volkov's deceit. Bids soared, each number a fresh wound to Ethan, a testament to the value Volkov placed on Sophia's unwilling genius. As the bidding reached its climax, a high-pitched, insistent ring cut through the hushed reverence of the room. It was Ethan's phone, deliberately set to its loudest, most jarring tone. All eyes turned to him. "My apologies," Ethan said, his voice calm, projecting across the room, "but I believe there's been a slight misrepresentation." Volkov's head snapped towards him, his eyes narrowing into slits of pure venom. Recognition, sharp and instantaneous, flashed in their depths. "This Malevich," Ethan continued, holding up his phone, its screen displaying a meticulously detailed, irrefutable analysis he'd commissioned from a renowned art forensics expert, "is a masterful forgery. A brilliant imitation, yes, but a forgery nonetheless." He paused, letting the murmurs ripple through the room. "And I have the evidence to prove it." Forgeries, by the way, that connect directly to a multi-million-dollar money laundering operation, funneling funds from illicit activities. Chaos erupted. Gasps, whispers, frantic phone calls. Volkov's face, usually impassive, contorted with rage. His hand instinctively reached inside his tailored jacket, but before he could complete the motion, a team of plainclothes FBI agents, who had been discreetly positioned by Ethan's carefully orchestrated tip-off, moved in with swift, silent precision. Volkov was pinned against a marble column, his face a mask of impotent fury. But the real drama unfolded behind them. Sophia, her eyes wide with shock and a terrifying mixture of relief and fear, saw the agents. She saw Volkov being apprehended, and then she saw the two figures emerging from the elevator, escorted by another agent. Lena, looking frail but safe, and Elena, her mother, her face etched with exhaustion, but also with a glimmer of bewildered hope. Lena, spotting Sophia, let out a joyous cry, a sound like a lark's song after a long winter. "Sophia! Sister!" Sophia's knees buckled. Her entire body seemed to deflate, the tension of a decade washing over her. She stumbled forward, tears streaming down her face, no longer silent, but raw, unfiltered sobs of pure, unadulterated release. She knelt, embracing Lena, holding her fragile sister as if she were the most precious, delicate masterpiece in the world. Elena, her eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow, joined the embrace. It was a tableau of reunion, a family finally reclaiming what had been stolen from them. Ethan watched from a distance, the storm inside him settling into a quiet, profound peace. He saw the fierce, protective love in Sophia's eyes as she cradled Lena. He saw the genuine, radiant joy that finally broke through her guarded exterior. That was the Sophia he had always known. The artist whose soul bled emotion onto canvas, now spilling her heart onto the cold marble floor. As Volkov was led away, his eyes, burning with a cold, impotent fury, fixed on Ethan. "You'll regret this, Thorn," he spat, his voice a low growl. "You don't know what you've unleashed." Ethan met his gaze, his own eyes cool and unwavering. "I think I do, Volkov," he replied, a quiet strength in his voice. "I've unleashed freedom." Later, as the chaos subsided and the FBI began their meticulous sweep, Ethan found Sophia sitting quietly with her mother and Lena in a secluded corner of the penthouse. Lena sketching diligently in a small notebook, a faint smile on her lips. Elena, holding Sophia's hand, whispered words of comfort and pride. Sophia looked up, her eyes meeting Ethan's. The guardedness was gone, replaced by a profound, overwhelming gratitude, and something deeper, something that spoke of renewed connection. "You did this," she whispered, her voice still hoarse from crying. "You risked everything." "You did the same, Sophia," he replied, kneeling before them, his gaze sweeping over the family she had sacrificed for. For them, for Lena. "You fought a silent war for a decade. Now, it's over." She reached out, her fingers gently tracing the line of his jaw. "How did you know?" "I never stopped looking," he admitted, his gaze holding hers. "And Mrs. Petrov, she told me about Lena, about your mother, about the choices you were forced to make." A profound silence settled between them, a silence filled with unspoken years, with shared pain, and with a tentative, blossoming hope. Lena, sensing the moment, looked up from her drawing, her bright eyes innocent yet perceptive. "Are you going to stay, Ethan?" she asked, her voice small, almost a plea. Ethan looked at Sophia, a silent question passing between them. Her eyes, still tear-stained, held a fragility he longed to protect, but also a new, burgeoning strength. "I'm not going anywhere, Lena," he promised, his gaze unwavering. "Not if Sophia will have me." Sophia's lips curved into a soft, genuine smile, the first truly unrestrained smile he had seen in 10 years. It was like the sun breaking through storm clouds, illuminating the hidden depths of her beauty. "Always," she whispered, her voice imbued with a newfound lightness, a freedom that seemed to lift the very air around them. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, a promise etched in their touch. The eternal flame, once a flickering ember beneath the ashes of separation and fear, now burned bright and steady, illuminating their path forward. It was a flame forged in sacrifice, tempered by hardship, and reignited by an unwavering love. Brooklyn, their city of contrasts, would witness not just the hustle and the chaos, but the enduring power of a bond that had defied odds, distance, and the darkest of shadows. Their story wasn't just about a second chance. It was about the profound beauty of building a future from the shattered pieces of the past, together. commentary. Thank you for experiencing Eternal Flame with us. We hope you found Ethan and Sophia's journey as moving and inspiring as we do. Their story is a powerful testament to the enduring nature of love. It illustrates how love can persist through time, distance, and adversity, its flame capable of rekindling even after years of separation. We witness the importance of resilience, both in personal strength and the ability to overcome life's challenges. Sophia's journey highlights the courage required to protect loved ones and the transformative power of art, even when used for painful purposes. Ethan's unwavering devotion underscores the value of perseverance in pursuing one's heart's desire and fighting for what is right. Ultimately, Eternal Flame reminds us that second chances are not just possible, but often necessary. It emphasizes the beauty of finding strength in vulnerability and the importance of cherishing the connections that truly matter. It teaches us that even amidst life's most formidable trials, love can illuminate our path, helping us face the darkness and leading us to a brighter, more authentic future. If you were touched by this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more narratives of hope and love to life.